Hey there, Together Learners. Eric back again. In this video, we're talking about all the things that make up computers. Not just any computer, any type of device, like a smartphone perhaps, or other computing devices like a laptop. All of them share kind of the same basic categories and the same kinds of components that make a computer work. So in this video, we're going to talk all about computer parts and how they work together to do things for you for all your devices and computing needs. This is part of our larger digital literacy series where we're doing a bunch of courses and videos about all things digital literacy, all the things you need to know to control your life and to better your future with technology. And in this video, we're talking about technology tools. From input to processing to storage to output, all together make computer parts. Coming right up. All right, so computer parts. They've pretty much stayed the same for the last, 25 years plus that I've been making computers. The same categories are there, even though we have, smaller laptops and smartphones. A lot of the same basic components are still in there. And like I said before, to help explain all of these parts, I'm going to be showing you some devices here on my desk and a couple of other things. But they're basically broken down into 4 categories to help us understand. And if you'd like to know about this basic computing process, about putting stuff from your brain or a human into a computer, input devices, from processing devices to calculating all these things, to storing information for longer periods of time or perhaps short periods of times, and then outputting that information to a human, usually. It could be a monitor or something like that, so we can see it. And this all goes down to how a computer works. If you want to know more about this process in general, that all these parts that we're about to name actually go through, come watch a separate video for that in one of our courses. All right, so first, let's talk about input devices. It's probably the most common. We're starting with the easiest one, right? Because these are the things you touch pretty much every day if you use any type of computing device. If you want to put information into a machine, into a computing device, you will use one of these parts, one of these pieces of equipment. You can call them lots of different things. So let's go through a little bit of list. You can probably think of one right off the bat, but here's one, a pen tablet. I have one here on my desk. I'll show you some of these input devices in just a second that I have collected. But pen tablet, you write it down and then it gets scribbled something on a screen, right? Artists use these, architects use these to input drawings and writing into a computer. Touch screen, almost everybody that has a smartphone is familiar with that. You touch a screen, you can swipe on it, do actions on it, touch things, and therefore when you touch things on a screen, it inputs your touch and therefore something happens, right? Microphone, I'm talking into one right now. My voice is going into a computer and it's being translated, of course, down into binary code or something that happens through the process of digitizing audio. Again, that's the process of things. We'll talk about that in another video. But microphone is an input device, and we're using it more and more often. For example, our digital assistants now that we call upon in our smart devices. Camera is also an input device. It's taking in visual content of things around us and now we're able to have like motion sensors and facial recognition and all types of stuff that's done in the processing end of it as well. But we need that input device as a camera to feed in that visual data into computers, don't we? And of course, we all know the keyboard and mouse as the critical thing that hopefully you should be able to use. We actually have a typing course on togetherlearning.com if you want to up your typing skills. I'm just going to have you take a look at my desk down here, and you can see some of these input devices. Some of them are a little bit unusual, but of course, you guys will probably recognize this guy here. This is an input device. It's a Xbox controller, so a game controller can be considered an input device. Here we have a wireless microphone here. This is an interesting device. This is a infrared sensor. So it detects motion, right? So you wave your hand over this, move your fingers, it detects how your fingers are being moved. And so you can do something called motion capture, where I'm moving my arms and controlling animated things. I have another video on that if you'd like to see more about motion capture. Here is a air mouse. It's a mouse, but you control by using your motions in the air. So if you want to move the cursor on a TV, perhaps you're familiar with that. But of course, on the back is a traditional keyboard, in which I have on my desk already a keyboard, a number pad, a mouse, and this is called a Stream Deck. It's just a programmable series of buttons that I actually use to control and record videos. And here's that pen tablet I was talking about a little while ago as well. So all of those things are also input devices, things a human does, a human creates information we want to put into a computer. We use all of these devices. Now, this isn't really a category per se, but when we want to put a bunch of computer parts together, we need to put them in a place together. And so we usually have a case. There's usually a standard way and a size and a way bolts are arranged. We've kind of decided on a standard about how this happens. And so we're able to buy cases that fit lots of different parts, like a chassis of a car, right? We attach the wheels and the doors and the windows and the engine to the chassis of a car. We need that for a computer. So when we want to plug in all of our input devices, like our keyboard and our mouse, we need a place to plug it in. And our case allows us to have those places to plug in and then connect all the parts together inside of a PC. It's not really an input device per se. It's not really a storage or a processing device per se. And neither is this next one, but both of these are crucial, right? Because we also need electricity. We need a power supply in our computing devices to make it run, right? So in the case of smartphones and tablets and laptops, that's usually a battery, which we have to plug in. Then that battery powers the unit. But in a PC or a Mac on a desktop setting, you usually have a power supply, which takes in electricity from the wall and makes sure that it's at the correct wattage for the rest of the PC, and then distributes that to different parts inside of the PC. So very important part of the PC. If this piece is even slightly malfunctioning, the rest of the computer won't work, because that consistent power supply is crucial for any of these parts that we're about to mention. So we got the input devices. Now we got a couple of kind of miscellaneous case and power supply to put everything together. But what's inside of that case? What's inside of that case is processing devices. And these are the things that take your input, your voice, the video from the camera, or when you hit a key on your keyboard or swipe with the touchscreen, computer does something with that input, and it does a lot of different things. It has to run millions of instructions to do every little thing that you input to a PC. Again, that's the process. We're going to talk about that in a separate video, but for now, let's talk about these devices, these parts inside of your computer that help process information once they get inputted. One of probably the most important is almost every computing device has a motherboard. And it's called a motherboard because it's the mother to all other parts inside a computing device, a PC or a Mac. It connects. It's basically like the roadways. It's the pathways of connecting all of the devices inside of your computer. And this could mean connecting all of the other parts that are usually inside of a case of your PC. So all of the things that go in your PC, and also it has the connections for which to put your input devices as well. It usually has like maybe USB ports or a connection to connect your other input devices as well. Some expansion slots to put in other perhaps processing devices connected to it. Of course, the most obvious thing that the motherboard is housing, and a specially built slot for particular ones is in the motherboard, and that is the CPU, which stands for Central Processing Unit, which is basically the brain of any computer, right? It's taking all of that input. The motherboard is gathering the input from each of your devices and channeling that into the CPU, which then runs a set of instructions, kind of puts it down into ones and zeros perhaps, and then crunches those instructions and then sends those computations or the finished product of all those end instructions out to other parts through the motherboard. So the CPU is very linked to the motherboard, and not every CPU will fit in every motherboard. You need probably to have a specialized motherboard to connect with the right CPU. So not every CPU will fit in every motherboard, but it's pretty standard. You just have to make sure that your motherboard and CPU are compatible. Right, we have these expansion slots also inside of a motherboard or on a motherboard. And these expansion slots are usually in the form of something called PCI. They're express lanes that can send data back and forth very quickly between the rest of the parts and the CPU of your computer to some other computing device. It could be a wireless card so you can transmit to your Wi-Fi, or a GPU. You can see the connection to the PCI slot right up here. So it is a graphical processing unit, which is an expansion on top of your CPU, which then can now crunch, is specially designed to crunch numbers to output to a monitor, to do all those difficult processing of polygons to render them on a screen. It takes a lot of processing power to do all that. And so usually we have a separate processing unit just for the graphics and displaying those graphics to an output device, which we'll talk about in a little bit. RAM stands for Random Access Memory. This is kind of a quasi-storage device. You might consider it a storage device because all it does is let you store memory for a short period of time so it can be accessed quickly, and then perhaps it'll be processed at a CPU or GPU, or maybe stored later on in a storage device. But the thing about the random access memory is it's only able to have data inside of it when it's receiving power. So it's quick. You can put in and out information and data very quickly, but as soon as you lose power or you turn your computer off, everything, all the data that's stored in random access memory will be lost. And so it's quick, and your computer uses a lot of RAM. That's what happens when you load up some software, right? It says loading. What it's doing is taking that information from storage and putting it into random access memory so it can access it more quickly and run your game or your piece of software from the memory loaded into RAM. And these are special slots that are connected onto your motherboard, usually very close to the CPU. Next, storage devices. There's all types of storage devices, but there's one kind of main one that's inside of the case of your computer, and that is called a hard drive. And the inside of a hard drive looks like this. It's a magnetic disk where a little arm comes in and rearranges the disk in such a way to store data for long term. Unlike RAM, random access memory, everything that's stored on a hard drive, when it loses power, it stays there indefinitely unless it gets scratched or demagnetized or something like that, of course, right? But the flip side of that is that it's very slow because it actually has to change the disk physically to store that information. So if power goes out in your PC, that information is then even stored for a later time. And a hard drive, which we have now, but now we have solid disk drives, which are smaller, and they don't save data quite in the same way. We also have thumb drives, of course. Many of you have USB thumb drives, We had things like tape drives and floppy drives. There are all types of other ways and devices from which we store data. And we also have to translate again the data when they get stored to help us save space. Sometimes we compress the data. Sometimes we change it perhaps from maybe binary to hex. Again, that's part of the process, not actually the devices that use them. All right, so we got through a couple of the categories already. Our input devices, right? The things we humans use to put information into a computer to get processed, everything inside the case, and then that data has to get stored somewhere. But what if we want to see the results of our input after they get put into a game or get processed by a word processor or a program that runs some special algorithms that help give us the answer to analyze our data, right? We want to see what happens after the fact, after our data gets processed, and we need output devices for that to happen. And see, these are some output devices you might see always. Of course, one of the more popular ones is your monitor. You're probably looking at one right now, or a touch screen is also an input and an output device at the same time on your phone or your PC. A printer, of course, is one too. You want to put that information onto a piece of paper to hand to someone or to save it for a later time. Speakers and headphones, of course. We can input sound into a microphone, but if we want to output sound, we have to do that through these output devices. A 3D printer and other output devices are coming around all the time. Additive processes where you take a 3D model, maybe scan it. That's another input device, a 3D scanner. And then you process that information or edit it a little bit inside your PC and process it, and then output it in the form of something physical through your 3D printer. Right? So there's a lot more input devices, storage devices, but these are pretty much in these kind of basic ones that I mentioned here are almost in every computing device possible, from everything down from your computer to your Mac to your PC to even your phone. So even your phone right here, you have your input device as a touch screen. It has a storage device inside. It has a camera to input as well. It's got a radio. It's considered a transmit device. It's an input and output device. It's got a cable from which you can get power to connect to the battery. I mean, that's just an example of things that are happening inside your phone that are happening just inside of a PC. We also have some other videos where you can see where I actually open up a PC and simulate building one with all the parts that we talked about in this video. You might want to take a look at that, and some other videos related to that, and the courses, of course, at togetherlearning.com. This has been a video explaining computer parts. I hope it was helpful. We'll see you in the next video, guys. Bye-bye now.